And we should be live. Welcome to Saint-Tropez. I'm just gonna give it a minute until I can see that you guys are indeed in the chat. And I can see the numbers, so you should be here. Let me know in the chat that you can indeed hear me properly. We've got about 10 minutes to go. So if you are joining me live, you've got to wait 10 minutes before we officially kick off into the walking part of the tour. And if you are watching the replay in the next few weeks or months, if you wanted to skip the next 10 minutes to go straight into the walking tour, feel free to do so. And welcome, Shaz. Looking and sound good. Perfect. Thank you, Tish. Let me flip this camera around so you can see my face. So we've got about 10 minutes to go. We're just waiting for everyone to connect. If any of you are completely new to me, you're very welcome. I'm Nathalie, and make sure you do say hello in the chat. It's always great to have a few newbies. And welcome, Mitzi. Welcome, Ronnie. Nice to see you all here. Before anything else, you know what? Let's test the microphone. Hi, Tarek. Welcome. So most of you know the drill already. I'm gonna tap the microphone 3 times. You should be able to hear the tapping. Have we heard a little tap? Let me know in the chat, because if you've not heard it, that could be that the connections are not quite right. We don't want you to hear any wind noises, so although it's not very windy today at all. And welcome, Emma. Nice to see you, Catherine, and nice to see all of you today. We've got about 8 minutes to start. It is nearly 8:30 p.m. In France. Hi, Sandrine. Welcome, everyone. And you know what? Before we officially kick off, would you guys let me know in the chat what you know about Saint-Tropez? Maybe not you, Sandrine. I mean, everyone from abroad, because it's actually, you know, when I do the research for those tours over here, it's actually quite difficult for me to know what you do know, because Saint-Tropez is very famous, but I don't really know. I don't really know how much, because it's very much part of French culture in terms of movies and series. But I never really know how much of it was really broadcasted abroad. And you know what? It's hard to read. I'm gonna show you the sea again so I can read the chat a bit better. Because when the background is a bit too bright, the chat is white. Posh resort. Yeah, that's quite spot on, Tarek. Very posh indeed. Not much, says Pisas. Hot on bikinis. Well, Ronnie, there's no need for bikinis. You can have a monokini here. Saint-Tropez was actually the first city or the first town in the world where ladies started to go topless in the 60s. And then it started a fashion. Well, maybe not everywhere, but it's very common in France to go with a monokini. Posh holidays, yes, exactly. So you've not seen Saint-Tropez in any movies or series that you can remember? In the UK, you probably wouldn't have, but in America, there should be a show that you might have seen. Let me see what time it is. 6 minutes to go, guys. 6 minutes. I'm gonna try. Oh, I should have a better background if I stand up. Oh, thank you, Bridget Bardot, Mitzi is saying. I was wondering if you guys knew Bridget. Not exactly my generation, but huge celebrity in France. Is that where Coco Chanel had a house? Not sure. I wonder if she might have been towards Cannes. Not sure about Coco Tish. I want to say Cannes for some reason, but I could be... We're not far from Cannes, but we're just not quite there. Elton John videos. Oh, cool. I didn't even know about that. Oh, you've seen it in the movie. You've forgotten. Okay. Yes, she did, Tish. Okay, nice to see. We'll see a little statue of her in a moment. Cool. I didn't know whether you'd know about Bridget. Right, you know what? I'm gonna stand up. Then the background should be a bit darker than the sand. And then I should be able to show you my face for a minute. I know it's still very bright. Oh well, never mind. Your family lives there? Nice. Well, mine might be coming back down this area soon. So if they do, I might have a few opportunities to show you a bit more of the Riviera. But nothing is done quite yet. Ah, thank you, Shaz. And God Created Woman. Yes, that's really the film that made Saint-Tropez such a... Well, it was already famous with artists like painters and stuff, but that's really the movie that made it a hot spot for the rich and famous. Right, let me see. I think we've got about 4 minutes. Oh, 2 minutes to go. 2 minutes. We'll wait until it's officially time. I'm just gonna jump back into my flip-flops. Bear with me. And Linda is here. Welcome, Linda, and welcome everyone that just joined. La piscine. Okay. Let me try to go like this to be able to read the chat now, like this. Apology, RB, I can't see any of your message because it's on the right, the white rocks. Most expensive place in France for accommodation, in terms of hotel potentially, yeah. In terms of buying a property, you know, the cost of the square meter. But it's quite small. In the winter, you've got 5,000 people living here. In the summer, it's 100,000. Yeah. Right, let me check what time it is. Oh, 3 minutes. Don't know how I wasn't under the impression it was 2 earlier. So we've got 3 minutes to go. And welcome, Sarah, and welcome everyone that just joined. See. Well, you know what? I'm just gonna show you the background. I'm gonna show you the sea for now. You don't need to see my face because of the white or the beige sands. It's very difficult for me to see the chat. So let's flip the camera around. And welcome, Catherine. Nice to see you here. We've got about a minute to go. We're just waiting for everyone to connect. So we are on Saint-Tropez beach. I'm really focusing on trying to say my long E's. So I'm probably exaggerating the beach, just so no one thinks I'm saying something else. After 18 years in the UK, I still struggle with my long E's and my short E's. Yeah, it's very quiet at this time. Well, I was here a few hours ago, it was quiet already. It's not really high season quite yet. Come back in 2 months and you'll see. You love the sound of the water? Nice. It's very relaxing, isn't it? And let's check what time it is now. 1 minute to go. 1 minute. So this little beach here, it's kind of tucked away. It's not the main one where you have all those beach restaurants and stuff that are full of the rich and famous. This one is quite nice and away from the masses. And welcome Samantha, welcome everyone that just joined. Let me check if it is time to go. Yes, it is officially 8:30 in France, so welcome everyone. And without further ado, let's go. So we are in Saint-Tropez on the French Riviera in the department of Var, V-A-R. And we'll go for a little stroll into the town center on the famous harbor. One of the most expensive harbors in France. Actually, probably the most expensive. Lovely place to have a dinner by the sea. And I'm just gonna go up this little staircase over here. Because we've got a cemetery to see. The reason I was asking you in the chat about movies and series, it's because there's a French soap opera that was on for 11 years in France, but apparently also in the globe. Cool, apologies, I've just lost you for a sec. We should be back now. Let me know in the chat that you can hear me properly. So yeah, just to tell you what you might have missed when the signal dropped. I was saying the reason why I asked you about TV series and movies, it's because there's a soap opera, or there was at the beginning of the year 2000, that was set in Saint-Tropez. In French it was called Sous le Soleil. But in America and most of the globe, 178 countries apparently, it was called Saint-Tropez. I'm not sure why it was so famous, because it was crap. If you don't remember the show, some of you might remember the music. It was from a very famous French artist called Pascal Obispo, and it went On croit la vie plus facile ailleurs. Pourquoi serait-elle meilleure sous le soleil? Bleu marine et bleu et pareil, jusqu'à en oublier tout. Fermez les yeux, et c'est le même bleu dans le cœur ou sous le soleil. The only show was not great. But apparently many people did. Do let me know in the chat if you've ever seen it. And time to show you potentially the most beautiful cemetery. Sandrine, I think it was composed by Obispo. I don't think he ever sang the tune himself, but I think he was the composer here. We don't have many, I don't even know if we have any others, but we don't have many cemeteries in France that are like this on a seafront with such a view. But this is quite a special place to be buried at. Thank you, Samantha. Not sure that was any good, but I thought you might recognize it. So yeah, that's a beautiful cemetery. And you know what? Let me actually stop here. I'll show you a little video, because obviously I can't take you inside of the cemetery right now because it's closed. It's probably closing about 5 or so. But I'll show you a little video I filmed earlier, because let me show you. Excuse my finger, but that's an interesting headstone. Let me show you. I'm gonna risk it and go full screen. That might make a mess, but oops. No, let's do full screen. Oops, shit, sorry. So yeah, that was earlier this morning. Apologies, the chat is gone for now. Yes, I've got the chat. So yeah, beautiful setting. There are a few famous people buried in here. Brigitte Bardot's mum, I think, is here. If you know you French singers, you might also know Pierre Bachelet. I don't even know who they are. I just know their names. And the grave that's the most unique, it is Eddie Barclay. He was also a musician, but he was mainly a producer. So that's the grave, with those music discs all over it. So he was a big gentleman of the evening and the parties of Saint-Tropez. All the names on the disc, it's actually artists that he would have produced. So most of the French music legends. And his epitaph is amazing. Que la fête continue. So the party continues, or may the party continue, or however you want to translate it. So quite an interesting headstone. And he lived here in Saint-Tropez and partied quite a lot from what I hear. Let me get rid of the video. Cool, let's go. So yes, some of you, even if you've not seen Saint-Tropez on TV or any movies or anything like that, you've probably seen paparazzi images of some celebrities. Like, well, you might remember Lady Diana in the 90s, you know, on Mohammed Al Fayed's boat. That was here, I believe. Well, even Ghislaine Maxwell was photographed here. So you have aristocrats, royals, or people from the music industry or the film industry. It's always been, well, not always, but at least since the 60s, a place where the rich and famous come to party. And actually, talking about the 60s, not the 1960s, but the 60s, you know, in Roman times. What happened in Rome, it's that you had those few Catholics, you know, and of course at the time, the Romans were still very much polytheist, so they believed in all those different gods and goddesses. They were not quite ready to convert to Catholicism, and of course some of those Catholics were martyred, and a lot of them became saints. That's actually exactly what happened to a chap called Tropez, or Torpis, depending on the version. Torpis was a Catholic that was killed by the Romans, and they put his body on a little boat, like a little barge, and they dropped him at sea. Eventually the boat was shipwrecked here. Apparently right here where the Marine Cemetery is today. And we know it's true because they did find some marble bits that would have been part of the shipwreck. So Torpis became the saint patron of the city. A little harbor was built around the place where his body was found. If we look up when we are in the village, we might see a few representation of Saint Torpis. So that, of course, gave the name to Saint-Tropez, the town's name. So I believe there are a few remains of the shipwreck, but they're not really here. I think they are in Cannes. Anyway, let's head towards the town center before the sun completely sets. Now, of course, you have rich and famous over here. So when you have rich and famous, what do you get? Gold diggers. There's one very interesting criminal that lived here at some point. The crimes were not committed here, but she did get married here with her first husband. And because she's such an interesting character, I've got to tell you about her. Her name was Fatima Aneshad. In 2002, she was married to a jeweler called Roger Bunderson. He was a rich man. He was making about 20K a month, euros. And he was into jewelry, but mainly antiques jewelry. He had a shop in close to the Louvre, apparently. He made a lot of money. His son David worked with him. And when he met Fatima, apparently Fatima was extremely beautiful. Now, I've seen photographs of her. I don't find her that pretty, but, sometimes people are not really pretty on a picture, but they're very charming, She would have been described as a femme fatale for some reason. Apparently, she was really, she could make men fall madly in love with her. And that's exactly what happened with Roger, or Roger in France. He was married. And when he met Fatima, he left his wife and started a crazy love story with Fatima. She would have plenty of gifts and jewelry and all that. And that's a nice globe with the sun right behind it. I think it's a monument for the Algerians that actually fought with France. Through the Algerian wars of independence, the Harkis. Anyway, back to Fatima. So, Fatima and Roger, they have a love story for about 10 years, and eventually he spent so much money on her that his finances were not as good anymore, and also he had created a software that was meant to be a software to stock, to detail all the diamond stock in every single jewelry across the globe, and he really believed into the project, and he had borrowed a lot of money for that project to happen, and eventually it didn't. So he had to find another way to kind of regain his money capital. He was getting a bit skint. And at that point, yes, beautiful sunset at this time. I was worried because, when you schedule the tour, you never really know in case of the mountains or where the sun might be. So perfect timing. I'm happy. Oh, there's a little lizard here. Hello. Hey. No, he's gone. So Roger needed some money, and apparently he heard of a great opportunity in Morocco. Now, Fatima was from Morocco. A kind of dodgy opportunity. He heard about some gold ingot that could come from the criminal world, but for a very good price. So him and Fatima went to Morocco, and a few days later, Fatima came back alone. Of course, Roger's daughter and son David were extremely worried. Apparently, he wouldn't spend a single day without calling his daughter. And even when he was meant to be in Morocco, Karen, the daughter, was calling him and never did he pick up. Fatima did, and she always had an excuse to explain why he couldn't pick up the phone. And eventually, David, the son, he believed that his dad had come back into Paris. They lived in Paris at the time, because the dad had dropped his cigarettes, his Marlboro Gold, on the table at the jewelry shop. And also he had a couple of missed calls from his dad, and Fatima was telling him, he's back in Paris now. but no one saw him, no one heard of him. And eventually Fatima told the kids, I mean, I said the kids, they were young adults at the time, Karen and David, because they wanted to call the police. You know, they believed something had happened to their dad. But Fatima was like, no, because he got into some trouble with some nasty people. You know, he borrowed some money. His business was a bit illegal. You don't want your dad to go to prison, right? You don't. So you need to tell the police that he's always done that. He's often disappearing for absolutely no reasons. And eventually David did exactly that. He went to the police and was like, yeah, my dad often disappears for days. There's nothing to worry about. And that was it for many weeks. When the kids were actually kind of reassured that, you know, the dad was okay, was just hiding because of some criminals and stuff, Roger's brothers were not so convinced. They had never, ever liked Fatima. And actually, before to go to Morocco, he had told them that it was Fatima's idea, that she had heard from a butcher about the gold and all that. So the brothers were very, very suspicious. And eventually, the brothers that were into the jewelry business as well, they looked at a little magazine that was published every so often, auctions, you know, jewelry auctions. And they found a lot of the jewelry that belonged to Roger. And eventually they also spotted his watch, his favorite watch that he never even removed from his body. Never, ever would he sell his watch. They were certain of that. So they suddenly believed that he had died, that someone must have taken the watch from his wrist. And of course they suspected Fatima. But would you believe the police didn't really dive in too much? Because, you know, the son had said that the daddy would disappear quite often, and also because they had no reason to suspect any foul play, really, because eventually they did confront Fatima, and Fatima was like, yeah, my husband he's been in touch, and he's asked me to sell some of his jewelry because, you see, he's in trouble. He's borrowed some money from some nasty people, so he's hiding from them. And that explained why she had his phone. So when she left Morocco, she left with his phone, because he didn't want to be traced, apparently, because of those criminals. And at the time, it kind of made sense. And Fatima claimed that she had sold the jewelry. It was her, because all the checks were actually gone into her account, but because her husband told her to do so, because he had to pay the criminals. And at some point, she had gone down to Marseille, and she claimed it was to meet Roger and give him 80,000 euros in cash. And the police looked into it, and they thought that she indeed went down to Marseille. Until then, the story kind of stacked up for many years, actually, until eventually, about 7 years later, there was a young coroner that opened the file again, and he was like, hold on, it looks a bit dodgy there. And when the police had gone down to Marseille, they had met a guy called Mohammed that was visited by Fatima that day. He had claimed at the time that Fatima was really worried about Roger, and because he was a psychic, he had done the cards for her, when you try to read the future with cards. And at that point, so 7 years later, that very Mohammed, he felt very guilty, so he had to call the police, and he told them that he was not a psychic at all, that it was a completely different business that he had done for Fatima. Because you see, at that point, Fatima was still living with her stepdaughter, Karen. So Karen was very worried about her dad, of course, and eventually she would sometimes suspect Fatima. And what happened is Fatima wanted to give a proof of life to Karen. And eventually Karen was like, okay, when you speak to him on the phone, you record him, okay. And one night, Fatima came up with a recorded message on her cell phone. And that was Daddy's voice, that was Roger. It was a bit of a cryptic message because allegedly the signal was not great. So he was like, oh, I'll call you back, I wanted to speak to you, but oh, kiss, kiss my love, I'll call you back. You know, a very short message, but it was definitely his voice. So they took it as a proof of life. And when that young man, Mohammed, called the police from Marseille 7 years later, he said to them that he was not a psychic, he was a sound engineer. That Fatima had turned up with an old tape from those voicemail machines, and she had asked him to do a fake recording of a phone call. So that was very dodgy. Suddenly there was no proof of life whatsoever since Morocco. By the way, we are now at La Ponche, Plage de la Ponche. That was, I believe, featured in the movie, the Brigitte Bardot movie that we mentioned earlier in the chat. In French, it's called Et Dieu créa la femme. So in English, that would be God created woman. So 1956, quite an old classic. So that's the movie that really made Saint-Tropez very famous. And also it's after that ladies started to go topless. Hi Laurie, and welcome everyone that just joined. Now let's get back into Roger and Fatima. So at that point, the police is very suspicious with Fatima, of course, but she didn't seem to have benefited financially. Because would you believe, for 7 years after Roger had gone or disappeared, she had lived with Karen, so the daughter, so his daughter, in a little tiny studio flat. I say studio flat, it's not even a studio flat. It's what they call in Paris chambre de bonne. It's basically the little bedrooms under the roof that would have been used to house the servants back in the day. That little room was 8 square meters, and they didn't have a bed. So Fatima and the daughter Karen, they'd sleep together every single night for 7 years on the floor. So Karen would cry with Fatima, she'd feed Fatima, she became almost like a surrogate mother, when we believe now that she was her dad's killer. And at that point, the police still had absolutely nothing to prove it, though. So they started to investigate, and they dug into Fatima's past. And to their horror, they realized that 22 years earlier, she had another husband. With Roger, she was not married, but she had been married before. And that husband had disappeared in very mysterious circumstances as well. Actually, quite similar circumstances. That husband, she had met when she was 17 years old. She came from a very poor family in Agadir, Morocco. Her dad was a fisherman. And eventually, at the age of 17, when she was apparently extremely pretty, she'd met a singer called Michel Cronier, I should say. Michel was actually, he had a bit of fame in France. He was doing the opening for very famous singers like Claude François or Salut les copains, stuff like that. And he had started to, as his fame kind of went down a bit, he had started to work in a holiday club in Agadir. And so they met, they quickly married, and they had moved here to Saint-Tropez, where they lived for a while. They had 2 daughters together. And eventually, he's not that famous anymore. He doesn't make that much money anymore. So that's when, exactly, she's very much of a black widow. She was also sometimes dubbed in the press the happy widow. And at that point, so here in Saint-Tropez, she started to cheat on him, whenever she'd find a richer man. And poor Michel Cronier was depressed. And he was an artist, he was a singer, so he used to write about his sadness. That's often what inspires artists in general. And at that point, he decided to leave her. He took his 2 daughters and they moved to Guadeloupe in the French Caribbean. That's where I used to live as well as a teenager, in Guadeloupe. And apparently at that point, he had told some of his family and friends that he was a little bit scared of Fatima and that he was checking that she wouldn't fly to Guadeloupe. One day she did. And she came to visit him in Guadeloupe, and she picked up her 2 daughters. Michelle was never seen again. But would you believe she had managed to convince the family that Michel had unalived himself? She told them that he was depressed, and he probably was, because he was very much in love with her, and she was kind of leaving him, and at that point his parents in Paris, so he was allegedly in Guadeloupe and his body was never found, but he probably never left Guadeloupe. When his parents received a letter with his handwriting, that was it looked like a very sad letter, not really a suicide letter, but it could have been interpreted this way. And it was definitely his handwriting, but it wasn't stamped. How did it get to a mailbox in Paris with no stamp? I mean, it's very, very possible that Fatima dropped it there. And did he actually write it as a letter to his parents? Or did she maybe nick some of his songwriting, very sad songs, put them together like she did with the voicemail, and then dropped it in the parents' mailbox? We'll never know. Because would you believe they trusted her? They never actually went to the police. They kind of accepted the theory of him taking his own life. So yeah, very shocking really that she would have done pretty much the same thing 22 years later with a different man. We are now in Plage de la Gaille, by the way, another very Instagrammable spot. It looks a little bit like Saint-Tropez in Italy. And anyway, eventually, that's when the police decided to come and visit the flat where she lived with little Karen. And when they searched the property, they found a lot of documents in Arabic. It turned out that she had bought some properties in Morocco. So she lived in poverty in Paris for 7 years with the daughter of the man she had killed, just to kind of give herself the alibi, or at least the impression that she was poor and she didn't benefit financially from it. And she was actually caught by the police. She was tried and she went down for murder, although they had nobody. She was meant to spend 20 years in jail, but somehow we don't really know how they let her out. And of course, she jumped on a flight to Morocco. We do not have any extradition legislation between France and Morocco, so she's still there. She's still alive. She's still living free. She's in her 70s now, and so yeah, she very, very probably got away with murder twice. So probably the most successful Black widow. Well, we don't know, because there probably are many, many more that are successful as well, because, well, if we don't know about them, But yeah, an interesting lady that would have once lived in those little streets of Saint-Tropez. Now let's go inland, into the town center. We won't go too far down because those high walls are quite tight sometimes. Those little streets are very tight in together. That's actually because they were afraid of pirates, barbaric pirates in the 15th century. So that's why it was built very, very close together, because they could, defend one another, really. We are now on Place de l'Hôtel de Ville, I think it's called, and if you've got good eyes, there's a little Saint-Tropez up there. I think that's him. Let me zoom in a bit. See the little icon there? That's Saint-Tropez. I don't know if you can hear the bell in the background, but the church bell is ringing. And let me show you the town hall. Now, I know some of you are quite great fans of doors and gateways. Let me show you an amazing door over here. It's really, it really highlights the past of Saint-Tropez as a place for seamen, you know, and explorers, and because it is a harbor before anything else. This is the Zanzibar port. There we go. See, this is actually from Zanzibar. It was brought in the 19th century by sailors that went to visit. So it's quite an interesting door. It's Captain Cerilola that brought it back. I'm gonna step back so you get a better view of the door itself. Yeah, it's amazing that it's made it all the way from here, from Zanzibar to here. There we go. Interesting gate. Cool. Let's go down the port. So the Saint-Tropez harbor, that's where you have all the yachts from the rich and famous. If you want to moor your boat in the harbor, it's up to 1,500 euro a day. So that's quite an expensive place to come and park your boat. I didn't notice this one earlier, but let me show you. There's a little anti-urinating corner. See, when they have a nice corner that would be nice for a gentleman to urinate, they put this bit of concrete. So if I wanted to pee, that would reflect back into me. Well, I cannot pee standing, but some gentlemen might. Here we go. So that's the port. So that's where Mohammed Al Fayed would have kept his yacht in the 90s, you know. Some of those boats look quite expensive, but if you can afford to park it for 1,500 a day, then you probably have enough for a boat. And let me show you in the background, Saint-Tropez was also a shipyard. See the crane straight ahead there? That's actually listed. It's part of the heritage, the old crane straight in the middle. So that's part of the shipyard. And let's go down to show you some of those fancy restaurants and bars and cafés. Very overpriced for most of them, and very overrated if you ask me. I mean, the French Riviera is nice everywhere. Literally from La Ciotat, where I used to live, all the way down to Nice. I don't know a single town that is not nice. So I don't know why Saint-Tropez is so hugely internationally famous, because really we have a lot of lovely little ports all across the Riviera, and most of them would cost you 3 times less to come and stay. But if you want to be seen with the rich and famous, you probably want to come and moor your boat over here. Now if you see the red establishment there, that is Sénéquier. It's I think 1887. well, they used to do lovely patisserie and stuff. Now, the Google reviews are actually horrible. Apparently, they're really rude and stuff. But it's probably the most famous institution in Saint-Tropez. They're always full anyway, so they don't need to be nice. And apparently, well, according to Google reviews, at least the food is not that nice. But yeah, that's the place where a lot of celebrities have come or still come for breakfast, dinner, lunch, coffee, drinks, whatever it might be. Sénéquier, probably the most famous bar over here, or restaurant. Now, talking about those yachts, there was very potentially a terrible case of manslaughter that happened on one of those boats in the 90s, 1993 to be precise. It's probably the only infamous murder case in Saint-Tropez. It really shocked a lot of people, and even the town hall was not impressed. They wanted the story to go away, you know, because it kind of damaged the image of Saint-Tropez. It was a young girl, 29 years old, Barbara Cole. She was half French, half British. Her dad was British. She was a bit of a socialite, you know. She knew everyone in Saint-Tropez. She used to party over here. She even had worked as a waitress in La Cave du Roi. That's another famous establishment. And she had stopped taking any party drugs and partying too much because she had a child. And she'd started a job as an interior designer in Paris, but a lot of her fancy customers she would have met here in Saint-Tropez. And one summer she took about 3 weeks holidays and she came back down to Saint-Tropez to party. She enjoyed a couple of weeks of summer, and towards the end of August, one night, a tragedy struck. You may have heard of the French singer Johnny Hallyday. He, like many French celebrities, he had a villa over here on the hill, you know, not quite here on the port, but on the hills. And one morning, very early morning, very close to his villa, a body was found. A naked young girl, very pretty girl. And next to her body, her items of clothing had been carefully folded and dropped right next to the body. The body was very quickly identified. She had some papers on her, so they knew it was poor Barbara Cole. She would have been identified very quickly anyway, because everyone knew her in Saint-Tropez. And that was very odd, because the body didn't have any marks of any traces of violence or anything like that. The autopsy result came, and she had been hello. Sorry, I'll tell you later. Someone just grabbed me from behind, but I don't know them. So her body was had not suffered any violence, but they found in her blood traces of heroin, whiskey, and cocaine. So that would have been some type of an overdose, but next to the body there was no bottle, no empty bottles, no empty glasses, no traces of any bags of drugs. And the church top here, that's probably the most famous view of Saint-Tropez. It's that little church that you always see on paintings. And they didn't quite know how she would have ended up there, because clearly in that state, with all those drugs in her system, she wouldn't have been able to walk alone all the way there. And so the body looked like it had been dropped. So at first they imagined that there was some kind of a party in one of those big mansions, maybe Johnny Halliday's one. But they went on ask, and no one knew anything, you know. And Johnny Hallyday was not even there anyway. He had given landed his property to a French singer called Sylvie Vartan and her husband. And Sylvie had done nothing. They were just sleeping that night, so they knew nothing about it. The public in Saint-Tropez didn't really speak. No one actually said much. No one knew anything. No one had seen anything. Or at least they didn't really speak straight to the police. But there was a name that came to their understanding. It's that she might have had an affair with a guy called Patrick M. Now, Patrick M was very famous in Saint-Tropez because he was the guy selling those yachts. He walked between Florida and Saint-Tropez. He was from a family of sailors and family selling boats. Everyone knew him. And apparently he had been dating Barbara for a couple of weeks. And the police was under the impression that they might have had a party on his yacht. So they went to ask him. He said, yes, I've indeed been seeing Barbara for a few weeks. She did come on my boat the night before, but there was no drugs or anything. And I dropped her on the port, here on the port. And that's the last I saw of her. Now, there were two more people that would have been at that party on the boat, but they were from America. And what a coincidence, they flew back the very next morning. They were not actually interrogated by the police until 2 years later. And eventually the police had nothing to go on. They concluded that it would have been an accidental death, although there were actually more questions raised than answered. So the family, of course, was not satisfied by the story, so they hired a private investigator. He was a chap that was very famous at the time in south of France because he worked on some cases that were quite infamous. His name was Bernard Naranjo. He worked on the case of, well, actually, you know what, I probably shouldn't tell you much about that case because if I ever take you to Cannes, I'll tell you the full story. There was a huge murder mystery around Cannes. It's basically an older lady that was, we've got a bit of acrobats performance here. It was an old lady that was killed in her property, but with her finger on her blood, someone had spelled Omar m'a tué. Omar killed me. Omar was the gardener. And I can't stay too long over here because of the music, guys. So I'm gonna go a bit further down. Sorry, I can't show you much of the show. So yeah, one day if I take you to Cannes, I might do if my parents do move back down to the south. I'll tell you the full story. But another interesting murder mystery on which Bernard Naranjo had worked. So he had a great reputation as a private investigator. And would you believe he actually tried for 10 years to interrogate people and to follow up the case of poor Barbara Cole. And he believed at the time he had found some evidence, or at least people that did tell him that she had died on a yacht. They had panicked. They took her body into a 4x4 car, and then they had tried to bring her back to life, but they actually kind of pushed on her rib cage, trying to do resuscitation, and that's when they've dropped her. So that would very much implicate Patrick M. Eventually, the police went back to arrest Patrick M. And he panicked. He'd never been to a police station like that. He panicked, and eventually he admitted it. He said yes, there was a party. He didn't give her any drugs, but she had passed away, and he said yes, I've dropped the body. Then they decided to let him go for the time being because until the trial and stuff. But then he came back on what he had said. He later claimed that he had only admitted that because of police pressure, that he had not done anything, and he came back to his first version where he dropped her on the port, and that was it. To this day, the police still doesn't have any more evidence, so Patrick M is still free. Poor Barbara's mother still believes it was an accident. There were some crazy conspiracy theories. People believed that maybe Barbara had witnessed some people selling guns and then she would have been eliminated. And it is possible, but it does look like an accident and a cover-up, so a tragic case of manslaughter. But sadly, to this day, the family of poor Barbara doesn't have any closure. The mother is still wondering what happened to her daughter. And actually, even when the mother came down to try to investigate herself, apparently the town hall was telling her to stop it, because that was kind of tarnishing the image of Saint-Tropez, especially internationally, because of course Barbara was half British. Anyway, let's go back down the little streets. The performer has finished now, but we still have music, so I don't want to stay here too long. You might have seen already a few artists on the port. You still have a lot of artists around here. The port of Saint-Tropez has been painted so many times over the years. Let me show you a few examples. This one. So this is Paul Signac. He's the first one really that fell in love with Saint-Tropez. I think Signac is probably the 1880s. So he's painted a lot of images of the port. But then we had a few more that you may have heard of. This is, of course, Henri Matisse, Luxe Calme and Volupté. That's also here in Saint-Tropez. So you had Impressionists. And actually, I think just a few months after this one, Fauvism had started. Let me show you one more that was painted here in Saint-Tropez. La Baigneuse, Henri Manguin, so that's also in Saint-Tropez. So they all came around. There's a little, if you are into paintings, there's a little museum here. Let me remove this one for now. It's a former church actually, but that's the local museum where they have some of those paintings, especially from Paul Signac, because he's done quite a few. Now, Saint-Tropez, as we mentioned, kind of dates back to the time of Saint-Tropez and the Romans, but it really was built up a lot in the 15th and 16th century. At that point, we are not part of France quite yet. Provence actually became part of France in 1486. Now I'm gonna stop talking as I go through this little passage because the signal might go a bit funny. There we go. So yeah, actually when we went by the cemetery earlier, I didn't show you because there's not much to see, but there's a citadel, a fortification that dates back to the time where they joined France. So Provence only became part of the Kingdom of France at that point, and that's when they had built this huge fortification to protect them. Because at the time they were very much worried about the Spanish, but also about pirates, you know. When I took you to Morocco, Rabat, we might have spoken about those Muslim pirates, you know, those Barbary pirates. They would attack people at sea, but they would also attack little villages and towns and ports on the Mediterranean. So this is the head of a Barbary pirate here. This is la porte de la Maison des Morts, Moors as Moors, the Muslims. So that's a pirate's head you're looking at. So 15th century. So that's quite cool. And yeah, let's go down towards the Museum of the Gendarmerie, where I can show you Brigitte Bardot. So let me show you the poster. If you don't remember the movie, you may have seen the poster. So this was Dieu créa la femme, so God created women. in it. I'm not much into old classics because the soundtracks are, I don't know, they're just very old and they're not, but yeah, very iconic movie with, of course, Brigitte Bardot. So she's really the one that made the little port so famous. And she's got a little statue, so we'll go and see that. Now, there's another movie or a series of movies that were filmed here. Let me remove Brigitte, bear with me. It is Le Gendarme de Saint-Tropez. Gendarme is like a Guardia Civil, it's the French military police. So that's a series of comedy movies about a civil guard in Saint-Tropez. And actually, the place where the gendarmerie, so the police station or the military police station was placed, that's where they filmed the outside, at least. Nowadays it is a little museum because it's a hugely famous French movie. I know it's been broadcasted internationally as well, but in France at the time it was huge. And we still have, actually I've not seen him today, but there's very often in Saint-Tropez, I don't know, he might not be here anymore, it might have been a few years ago, but a guy that dresses up as an old police officer and he's kind of amusing people on the port. You know, he'll stop cars and he'll talk rubbish, you know, or he'll jump on a scooter, you know, on a moped on behind people's back and stuff. He's an actor, he's basically a street artist, but he's kind of imitating the old movie character. And apparently the civil guards today, they're still very much seen as nice because of the movie. When in many other towns you wouldn't really like them, you know, because no one really likes the police, do they? But here in Saint-Tropez, people like them because they think of the movie. We've got a lot of. Do you remember, like in the cemetery, the grave I've shown you, the one with the disc? So this is a little exhibition about him, about Eddie Barclay. So there's a lot of pictures everywhere of him partying around Saint-Tropez. So that's the man. That's the man that we've just visited in the cemetery. And now let me show you the very background for the movie. So this is the Gendarmerie Nationale. That's where Le Gendarme de Saint-Tropez was filmed. The outside scenes. Today it is the museum of the Gendarmerie and the museum of the cinema. So that's an interesting little museum to visit if you are into your French classic movies. I've never been inside because it's just not really my generation, you know. Anyway, talking about Brigitte Bardot, she has a little statue here. That's sexy. That's again Eddie Barclay having a breakfast on his after his wedding night with Johnny Hallyday sneaking into his bed. Anyway, let me show you Brigitte. There she is. That's a nice one. You love hearing me speak French. Yeah, I guess it doesn't happen very often. So she was very young and pretty, of course, in the 60s. And yes, she also became famous internationally for being an animals' rights defender. Right, let me know in the chat if you have any questions about anything before we go, because we're coming towards the end of the tour. At the time of Bridget, by the way, you know, I told you they started to go topless. It wasn't actually completely, I mean, it was topless. It would have been just the bikini bottom, but they had some kind of straps at the time. Absolutely useless. I don't know why. It wouldn't cover your nipples or anything. I wish I could show you a photo, but I can't, because I don't know. I don't think I'm allowed to show you any nipples on YouTube. I could be wrong. But yeah, if you wanted to Google them, Saint-Tropez 60s monokinis, you'll see oh, they have a nice rooftop up there. I never noticed. So yeah, they were literally like the bottom of a bikini with some straps for absolutely no reason. Look, that's probably a nice place to have dinner as well up there. Thanks, Sandrine. Thanks, Catherine. Thanks, everyone, for coming tonight. Hope you enjoyed it. If any of you dropped me a little tip on WhatsApp or PayPal, so that's Eddie again, it's always Eddie. That's very, very much appreciated, you know. I know I probably look like I'm in paradise, but it still takes a lot of time and researches to create those tours. So it's always very much appreciated if you were to leave me a little something. And if you want to see a bit more of the south of France, on Tuesday, 24th, it's Tuesday, right? Yeah, I'm taking you to Marseille. So hopefully you'll be able to join me. I think it's about the same time, maybe a little bit earlier. It's probably about 2 or 3 hours earlier than this one. That'll be right before I take my flight back. And might not cover too much of a distance, because I'll be with my 2 bags and my wedding shoes, because I don't really have any places in Marseille to leave anything behind. But yeah, that'll be nice as well. Thanks, Emma. Thanks, Linda. Thanks, Catherine. Always nice to have you along. Might see a few sketches. No, I'm afraid I'm not streaming the wedding.
I can see the pictures.
And it's a live.
Hi guys.
And
we love Saint-Tropez.
And yeah, thank you for coming, guys. It's always amazing to have you on board. I'll see you next week, and if not, I'll see you the week after that back in London. We're going back to Smithfield for London Way of Death, and then I'm taking you back to Ladywell and Brockley Cemetery. We've not done this one since being on YouTube, so it's been at least 2 years we didn't go down there. I had not gone back there because the thing is, the signal there is only good with my second SIM card, and because I had to put money on my second SIM card to cover France, so I get more signal in France, then I was like, yeah, we've got to go back down to Ladywell. No, I'm not wearing any dresses. I'm not the bridesmaid anyway. I'm a photographer at the wedding. So no dresses for me. London time, okay, 4:30 p.m. on Tuesday. So hopefully you can make it. And if any of you were completely new to me, if you've made it that far into the live or that far into the video, I do hope you'd subscribe, because of course you can catch them later. You know, the vast majority of people are actually watching them later, but I do believe it's much more fun to be live and to be in the chat, being able to interact. So if you want to make sure you don't miss out on the lives next time, what you want to do is subscribe and then hit the little notify me bell, so you'll get a little notification when I go live. So that way you'll be able to join us live and not watching the replay much later. Now I'm gonna go because I think my dad should be here somewhere waiting for me, picking me up. So I'll see you soon. Have a great evening or great morning, a great lunch, a great night, whatever time it is for you, wherever you are in the world. And see you soon. Bye bye.